Hello and welcome to Across the Channel. I'd like to start by saying thank you to everybody who listened to our first podcast last week. We got a really positive response, a lot of nice messages, and they were hugely appreciated. It is super encouraging. It makes me even more convinced that this show has a future. It is early days though, so please don't hesitate to leave a review on your podcast platform. Tell your friends about the pod. We really need your help to make this work. Also, get in touch if you've got any questions for us, for me, for my panel of experts. We have an email address, acrossthechannelpodcast@gmail.com. And now it's time for episode 2. Bonjour et bienvenue. Coming up on Across the Channel, Marseille's mad week ends in mad fashion as they put 5 goals past Paris FC before coach Roberto De Zerbi hints that he is ready to forgive Adrien Rabiot. PSG grab another 1-0 win thanks to Fabian Ruiz's goal against Angers. The champions have 2 wins from 2, as do Strasbourg, Lyon and Toulouse. Olivier Giroud's injury time winner clinched a triumph for Lille against Monaco. Meanwhile, there were also first victories for Nice against Auxerre, for Lens in Le Havre, and for Lorient, who thrashed the 9 men of Rennes by 4-0. Lots going on, lots to talk about, and I'm very pleased to say I've got 2 more excellent guests this morning. Let me introduce them. Jonathan Johnson, French football specialist, is with us. How are you doing, Jonathan?
Doing very well, thanks, and delighted to get an invitation to one of the inaugural episodes of this fantastic new podcast. So, on behalf of the French footballing community, thanks to Matt for putting this together. And it's great to have Ligue back on the airwaves.
Jonathan, a long-time friend and colleague of mine from Paris, been living in Paris for many, many years. Baptiste Reynaud is also with us today from Le Classique pod. Baptiste, who's spent quite a lot of time living in London, I believe, Baptiste. He is, though, a Frenchman. He is back in Paris. And welcome aboard. Baptiste, how are you this morning?
I'm great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much for the warm welcome and invitation. And always good to catch up with JJ as well. And just very excited to talk about a great weekend of French football, as always. Plus, I've got my Aubameyang Stade Lavallois shirt.
It is a nice orange shirt, Baptiste, but can you just explain the link a little bit? Because people will hear Aubameyang's name, they'll think Arsenal, Barcelona, but Laval.
Yeah, Laval, very small town in west of France where I was born, so personal links, and a Ligue 2 club for a long period of time, or a European in the 80s somehow, and it's a very rural area, and somehow Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was both born there and I think started his career in the youth ranks there, so it's not often that this part of France can get a shout out, and so I'm happy to do that.
Well, I'm sure you're bringing in plenty of new listeners from Laval with that. It's actually quite the breeding ground. Quite a lot of players have come from Laval, but we'll have a special Laval episode a bit later in the season. First of all, though, we're going to bring in Jonathan to talk about the heroes and villains. That's how we're going to start this week. So, Jonathan, who was your hero, first of all, from round 2 in Ligue?
Well, very fitting, actually, because my hero for this week was Aubameyang. I think when you look at the start of the season that Marseille made, obviously very disappointing to go down 1-0 to the 10 men of Rennes. They really needed a response. Started off quite well against Paris FC, then looked like they'd thrown it away a little bit in typical OM fashion, going from 2-0 up to being pegged back to 2-2, and then ran away with it a little bit at the end. But obviously Aubameyang coming up big with 2 goals, 2 really well taken goals actually as well. They weren't just tap-ins, weren't penalties either. A nice, athletic finish, I think I would term it, for the first goal, and then a very cool, clinical finish for the second, which really started to put the game beyond Paris FC. So I think for me, definitely Aubameyang stepped up when Marseille needed a hero and delivered, and I think has now cast a bit of shade on some of those who were doubting him perhaps in the opening episode of this pod.
That's harsh. But John, it's good to know you listened to episode 1 in which I tipped Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang to be a flop this season. There is still time for Pierre-Emerick to flop, but fair play to him. He got 27 goals the season before last, had a season in Saudi Arabia, now back in Marseille. And to be fair, he does look to be in good nick, doesn't he? But John, let's go for your villain now. Who are you going to pick out?
So in terms of the villain, I've gone for I'm not going to say an obscure pick, but anyone who's been following sort of the transfer rumours linked to French football will know that Lassine Sinayoko was being courted by Nice and is now directly heading towards Lens instead, but happened to play over the weekend for Auxerre against Nice and scored against them. So it's a good start to the season for him. Scored a stunner, obviously, in the opening day, and then followed that up with another goal, even if Auxerre did go down to Nice, who recovered after a bit of a tricky start to their season. But I think it was sort of pantomime villain territory, really, just trolling Nice before he heads off up north. And I'm really curious to see how this move actually pans out when he does finally get confirmed as a Lens signing, because he's been a fairly consistent performer for Pellicier's Auxerre over sort of the last year or so, especially. So I think to see him go to Lens to play under Pierre Sage, I'm really, really fascinated to see how that works out. And obviously Francaise losing out on a top transfer target to his former club as well. Yes, indeed. We will follow that transfer if indeed it does happen. The last I heard on Monday morning was that Auxerre hadn't sanctioned I hadn't given him permission to go and have his medical in Lens, but it does look as though Sinayoko's going to go. He's an interesting player, like you say, very wholehearted, strong, mobile attacker who seems to be bringing finishing now into his game as well. So a good shout, John. Thank you for that. Heroes and villains. Let's turn to Baptiste now. Who are you giving some love to this morning?
To another golden oldie in Olivier Giroud, 38 years young. Led the line sublimely against Monaco in a big contest, a real physical, intense contest, and he obviously scored the winning goal in the 90th. Also managed to miss a pen, but I think it was more. I was impressed not just at his technical ability, obviously still there after some time in the US, but it was more his endeavour and his desire throughout the game. He not only led the line, you could see him tracking back. He really got Eric Dyer and Mawissa tired over the game, and he was still fresh as it went along, and he gained in stature and composure, and I thought it was a really, really impressive performance. It would have been an impressive performance had it been anyone other than Olivier Giroud, but the fact that he's come back, 38 years old, seems to have real humility about him and to really want to lead Lille upwards, and he's got 2-2, could have been 3-2, but I thought he was outstanding yesterday night.
We're going to talk more about Lille in part 2. I was lucky enough to be at the Decathlon Arena last night and wholeheartedly agree with those words, Baptiste. I thought it was a tough game for him against a strong Monaco side. He didn't necessarily get a great service, had one chance, didn't he, that he volleyed just wide. The goal, though, he just spun Eric Dyer, brilliant finish. And on his home debut, that's his 350th career goal. Olivier Giroud, absolutely unbelievable. And like you say, 38 years of age, but this was a goal that he scored in the 91st minute. He was still fit enough, still fresh enough to have the presence of mind and the skill to turn and rifle in the winner. So I'm 100% on board, even more, I'd say, Giroud than Aubameyang. But, again, nothing against Pierre-Emerick. Baptiste, do you have a villain for us?
I mean, it could have been a whole team. It's rare that you have a team that, loses 3 men through red cards in 100 minutes of football to start the season. But I'm going to single out Christopher Wu of Rennes. Rennes already down to 10 after 5 minutes. And he proceeds to do a challenge that was unnecessary, frankly, against Lorient. Rennes go down to 9 men after 10 minutes. And just the fact that he proceeds to then head to the dressing room straight away and violently hit his hand against the door out of frustration and end up needing stitches is, I think, just absolute comedy gold. But, just a combination of factor. And it just led to a missed opportunity for Rennes after what was a really positive first game, winning despite being down to 10 men against Marseille. And in a Breton derby, they just threw it away through indiscipline, and Christopher Wu is indisciplined in so many aspects. So he's definitely my villain of the week.
Okay, well, thank you, Baptiste. I'm going to give you my hero and my villain quickly now. My hero, I was quite moved, which is rare, especially when I'm at the Parc des Princes. They had a big trophy ceremony after the game. They paraded their 5 trophies that they've won in the last year. And I don't want to sound blasé. I'm very privileged to be able to go to the Parc des Princes quite regularly and see these phenomenal players, these trophy ceremonies. But honestly, if I see Marquinhos parading another Trophée de Champion or a Coupe de France, and we are the champions blaring out around the Parc des Princes, I might just I don't know, go into some sort of coma or something. But what they've done is pretty unprecedented this time. So, they had the Champions League trophy, they had the Super Cup as well. So, absolutely it warranted celebrations, don't get me wrong. But what I found particularly moving was Gigio Donnarumma, who hadn't been seen yet this season. We know that Luis Enrique and the PSG hierarchy have decided to move on, to change goalkeepers. Lucas Chevalier's come in from Lille. It's incredibly harsh, the way Donnarumma has been treated, essentially, because he was absolutely heroic in helping them win the Champions League, and he's now been told, you're not the type of goalkeeper we want. And, that's ruthless. It's football, and it can happen. But what was nice is this wasn't staged. Donnarumma was out on the pitch. He seemed reluctant to go over to the fans. He seemed a bit embarrassed, really, to be there as well. And he was pushed by Marquinhos and by his teammates towards the supporters, and it turned out to be a really emotional moment where you could see he was really appreciating the love that he was getting from the PSG supporters. John, I know you're also a Parc des Princes regular. You must have appreciated that because he's had his critics through the years, but ultimately he's always been totally professional and played an integral part in PSG's greatest ever moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think fans will forget, that stunning second half of the season that Donnarumma had. And like you said, he was absolutely key in that run, in the Champions League. It was phenomenal to see it, up close, sort of having, followed PSG home and away through a number of those knockout games in the Champions League, notably at Anfield, but also at Villa Park as well. And, to see Donnarumma pull off some of those just absolutely incredible saves that only really Donnarumma, is able to pull off. His reflexes second to none. I do think that in terms of sort of the reasoning for this move, I can see why it's happening. I'm surprised that it's taken so long for Luis Enrique to sort of get his way in terms of the kind of profile of goalkeeper that he wants. But it's nice to see that Donnarumma isn't basically, being sort of shoved out the back door completely, and that, the fans were able to pay their respects to thank him, because it was an impressive turnaround from him last season. So, good luck to him if and when the move does go through as expected. But, I think Donnarumma definitely merited, that sort of send-off, and I'm glad that, the club and his teammates were able to facilitate that for him.
Yeah, no goals conceded yet by Lucas Chevalier, the €40 million signing from Lille. I just want to say, I honestly could have kept a clean sheet in Lucas Chevalier's place on Friday night. He was a spectator among the 45,000. Angers didn't have a shot on target. They did defend well and could have nicked a point, I guess, at the end. But to do that, they would have had to attack, and they actually just kind of, even at 1-0 with 5 minutes to go, kind of kept plenty of men behind the ball. But it's a different story. Very quickly, my villain, I'm going to stick with the goalkeeping theme. Radoslav Majecki, I'm sorry to single you out. You were the scapegoat for many at Monaco last season. Brest have obviously seen the quality in the Polish international. They've signed him to replace Marco Bizot. He's let in 5 goals, though, in 2 games so far, and he wasn't good at the weekend against Toulouse. Franck Magri scoring 2 goals. The first goal in particular kind of went through Radoslav Majecki. So it's always a bit harsh to single somebody out. It's early days, and I know he has qualities, but given that I also tipped Brest to be my dark horse in episode 1, I'd like Majecki to just do a little bit better than that. Now we're going to move on to Marseille chat, because the last week in France has been all about Olympique de Marseille. And I'm going to have to just start by giving you a little chronology of what has happened, just in case you've not followed it blow by blow, so to speak. There was a lot of optimism in Marseille at the start of the season. At last, there was stability and continuity under Pablo Longoria. Some good signings had been made over the summer period, and there was a feeling they could certainly close that 19-point gap from last season on Paris Saint-Germain. It started badly. They lost 1-0 to Rennes, despite Rennes playing with 10 men for almost the whole game. Ludovic Blas scoring a late winner. And then in the dressing room afterwards, blows were exchanged between Jonathan Rowe and Adrien Rabiot. The next day, reports that Jonathan Rowe had been transfer listed. Moving forward now to the Monday, Adrien Rabiot's mother, Véronique Rabiot, informs French media that Adrien Rabiot has also been transfer listed. Now, this was an absolute bombshell, because the Marseille hierarchy have spent the last few months basically talking about what a phenomenal player and man Adrien Rabiot is, the model professional, and they're delighted that they've managed to keep him after such a good first season in Marseille. But OM then confirmed it, releasing a statement saying the behaviour was unacceptable. They described the incident as a show of unprecedented violence. Roberto De Zerbi then spoke out, saying that Rabiot's main problem is his entourage. He says that he's not going to lose his dignity for one player. I'm not going to prostitute myself, said De Zerbi, i.e. he is standing in line with Mehdi Benassia, the sporting director, and the president, Pablo Longoria. We had Véronique Rabiot talking again to the media. She quite often does. She has said that Benassia and Longoria are not up to the task of leading Olympique de Marseille. Jonathan Rowe was sold to Bologna for 20 million euros, a player who it seems was leaving in any case because Marseille needed the cash. Adrien Rabiot reportedly apologised to Roberto De Zerbi, and after the game on Saturday, De Zerbi said, I haven't yet talked to Pablo or Mehdi about this, but I hope there is a possibility to repair the damage, i.e. he has opened the door to Adrien Rabiot perhaps staying. But interestingly, he also said, I haven't spoken to Mehdi or Pablo about this yet. Maybe he should have done that before speaking to the press about it. Baptiste, what do you make of all this? And can you imagine a scenario where after what has happened, everything that's been said, Adrien Rabiot does stay at Marseille?
It's Marseille. I mean, what else is there to say? They're known for their propensity to self-combust, I think is the way I would put it. And the environment around the club has always been difficult. I think even Pablo Longoria and Mehdi Benassia over the last 18 months have said separately that it's difficult to do what you want to do there. You don't necessarily have people pulling in towards the same objective there in and around the club. So it's no surprise that there's chaos. I mean, Longoria, Benassia, and De Zerbi don't also strike me as, cool, composed people. I think that's what makes them interesting characters and certainly very efficient ones in their fields, but that's the downside to it. Adrien Rabiot is also somebody who's conveniently been a scapegoat for a large part of his career. I think he obviously has his faults, but this is someone who left PSG under a certain cloud, has made decisions across during his career for his own sake, which I don't begrudge him at all. He's just taken ownership of his career. Has an outspoken mother who's also his agent. So that, I think that explains the chaos. Do I see a world in which Adrien Rabiot is back at the club and playing? Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past them. Do they need him on the pitch, I suppose, is my question. I think they do need him. I think for Ligue 1, they could do without him. But if they want to really position themselves amongst their fans as really trying to build a team that's not just competitive for Ligue 1, but trying to bring back a little bit of glory, European glory, in some shape or form, then they need to have players of the caliber of Adrien Rabiot, who's a World Cup finalist and has over 50 caps for France. So I think the victory at the weekend was a huge plus, and the fact that players like Aubameyang with real personality who understand the club stepped up was a massive plus, because now they can come out of that game with a little bit more composure, and that's maybe why we're seeing the signs that we're seeing.
John, what's your take on this? Surely if Marseille welcome Rabiot back now, having been so emphatic about this unprecedented violence, unacceptable. Surely they've got egg on their face. Can you be taken seriously as an institution if you bring Rabiot back?
Yeah, that is a really key question. And actually, just going back to what you said earlier about Véronique and sort of her sniping at the Marseille leadership in the press, I liked one of the phrases that she used where Mehdi Benatia and Pablo Longoria were accused of wearing suits too big for them, which, definitely made me crack a wry smile. Very sort of on brand for Véronique Rabiot. I do think, in a way, this is a really critical juncture now for Marseille and their leadership. They've been chasing the kind of stability and the kind of consistency, as De Zerbi himself alluded to, when I think in one of the recent press conferences, he was asked about sort of what's one of the key differences between, PSG and Marseille and sort of how PSG have managed to be so successful of late. And De Zerbi sort of alluded to the fact that PSG have now started to be more respected as an institution, I think, and that, the club now, matters more than any one player. I feel now that Marseille really have to take a hardline stance, and it's quite telling as well that De Zerbi is suggesting that he is open to reintegrating Rabiot into the squad, but also hasn't spoken about it with Benatia or Longoria just yet, which, I think would be a fascinating discussion, because I think that Benatia and Longoria will probably feel that, Marseille kind of have to move on without Rabiot, even if they could use him on the pitch and certainly in the dressing room when he's, not getting into physical altercations with teammates, because of that experience that he has and the leadership that he brings, and also the motivation that Rabiot must have, in this coming into this season, because you got a World Cup next summer, and obviously he'll want to remain a key part of Didier Deschamps' plans. And if he stays at the club at this moment in time, based on sort of all the noises coming out of Marseille, there's a possibility that he finds himself sidelined and essentially is watching, the next part of the season beyond the transfer window from the stands, which, wouldn't be great for player nor club.
Baptiste, just on a general note, regarding Marseille, I want to ask this to a Frenchman, because, I think you've probably got a better grip on this than a lot of people. Why is Marseille such a crazy football club? They have 67,000 at every game. The Velodrome's amazing. The whole city, and in fact the whole region, is Marseille crazy. That's my kind of interpretation. Is Roberto De Zerbi the right fit, given that he is a very emotional man? Part of me wonders if somebody much more sort of sober, and Igor Tudor, who did pretty well there, is actually a better fit for this completely crazy club. Although Bielsa was very emotional, and he was a hugely popular figure there.
I think on the first point, it's a cultural thing. I think Marseille really represents its region and the people there. There's a real mix of cultures, of Mediterranean cultures, of traditionally people who have faced difficult odds, I think is the way we would put it. It's also been a hotbed of positive immigration, and immigration that came through as a result of France's terrible colonial wars. But it's been a real mix of people based in and around the Mediterranean: Corsicans, Italians, French, people from Northern Africa, Spain. All those influences make for a kind of hot-headedness, and a real sense of pride, I think, is maybe something that links them. And Marseille have often been seeing themselves as the antithesis of Paris, of cold-hearted, slightly boring and pretentious Paris, whilst Marseille is where you'll find the fervour and you'll find the passion. And I think Marseille, the Olympique de Marseille as a club, has been a real representation of that over decades. Under Tapie, this was a really flashy owner who was here to promise the world to his fans, really to inject cash, not willing to look the other way as to how he was going to proceed about it, in a way that's very representative of Marseille. And I think they've kept good and bad aspects of it. As you said, the Velodrome is always packed to the rafters and has really fanatical support. It's one of the hotbeds of football in France, that's for sure. The downside and negative to that is that there are high expectations, both in terms of style and results. People want Marseille to play in a particular way. They want players to play with class, elegance, but also real passion, kind of Latin fervor, if I can put it that way. And I think the club has at sometimes tried to bring in a type of manager who's going to be this sort of calm, composed character. But when you're surrounded by people who are solely obsessed by this football club and who put a lot of pressure on you everywhere you go, it's a real microcosm down there. And I think that what's been sometimes seen as an intelligent, composed manager when results go against them, can be seen as lacking and being devoid of passion. And if there's one thing fans ask, it's that people are passionate. So in a way, yes, the ideal for Marseille would be to have consistency, stability at all levels of the club. That's what they've been asking for decades. That's what they've been needing for decades. But they keep on bringing those characters that also understand. They are populists because they understand the Marseille philosophy of the region and the fervor. So, it's kind of a virtuous or vicious cycle. I don't know, because it tends to work out more often than not when you think about it. They do tend to have positive results. But it's very, very specific to Marseille, and you don't see that at Monaco for obvious reasons. But even at Nice, you see a different kind of fervor, but also because Nice is a different population. It's a much more aging population, whilst Marseille is still very young and vibrant.
Great stuff. Very, very interesting. We'll be following Marseille's progress really closely this season. 15 years since they last won the league title under Didier Deschamps. We're going to take a very quick break, and in part 2, we will be asking the question, is Bruno Genesio the best French coach around these days? And does Ligue 1 have a penalty problem? Welcome back to Across the Channel. Jonathan Johnson and Baptiste Reynaud are with me, and we're going to start by talking a little bit about Paris Saint-Germain. No massive changes at PSG over the summer. A couple of big money signings, Barnier and Chevalier. They've obviously not had a very satisfactory pre-season. It's been shorter than usual, but they've got the points. 1-0 against Nantes, 1-0 against Angers on Friday. John, what are you making of it so far? Nothing to be alarmed about, obviously. Optimistic for PSG?
I think it's going more or less as I expected so far. I thought that PSG would have a pretty good baseline level because of how late last season finished and how early this season started. And I think obviously they probably could have done with 1 or 2 more games, to get them prepared before they had a competitive or a semi-competitive outing. But ultimately, I think the way that the Super Cup played out in the first 2 Ligue 1 games have been, with all due respect, quite winnable affairs for them. More or less going according to plan, I think, or as well as could be hoped. I think it's been a reassuring start for Chevalier after an early blip in the Super Cup. So, I think it's difficult to know what PSG could have asked for to have gone better. Okay, sure, they could have been scoring more goals, sort of been more free scoring and looked a little bit more dangerous in attack. But I think that will come, especially with all the talent, that Luis Enrique has available to him. And let's not forget as well, it's, a time of great uncertainty with the transfer window still open. So there's some players still sort of, playing for their future. Also the technical staff having to sort of juggle, the lack of, general match practice that some players had towards the end of last season when they'd gone a prolonged period of time without really featuring that heavily, and then suddenly getting thrown into the fray very early in this season. So I think overall, PSG will be fairly satisfied with the way that they've managed to get off to a winning start, put together back-to-back clean sheets, but they will, expect to build in momentum and power, as the games progress. Baptiste,
are you surprised that they haven't sort of freshened things up a little bit, particularly in attack? Like, they were incredible last season. Of course they've got some fantastic options. Kvaratskhelia didn't play on Friday. Gonzalo Ramos came off the bench. But, can Ousmane Dembélé repeat last season's heroics? Does Barcola have enough goals in him? I'm just wondering. I'm putting it out there, because people say also when you have a great season, that's the time to make improvements. Don't wait until things stagnate. What do you make of it?
I think it's kind of refreshing. For once, PSG seem to be banking on stability and backing the players that took them to the top last year. That hasn't been a pattern that they've gone through for over a decade, really, and I think that's something that Luis Enrique is looking forward to. You're right. The big question is going to be how does Dembélé turn up again and perform the way he did last year, because he was absolutely sensational, and I think he covered a lot of gaps actually, because as much as I like Bradley Barcola, he's still relatively inexperienced and he's still relatively inefficient, certainly in front of goal. And Désiré Doué, can play in a multitude of positions and has an eye for goal, but we haven't exactly seen him do it over a season, over a full season at PSG. I think he really came on towards the end of last season. So I think that, I think there are question marks, principally around the fact that they don't really have a backup to Dembélé. Gonzalo Ramos wants to start games. I think he has a very, very different style to Dembélé for obvious reasons. And so how that all fits together, I think going forward is where you might have a few concerns. And they're kind of showing at the start of the season, I think they have the luxury of playing themselves into shape in a way, as JJ said, but they haven't looked as cutthroat or cutting edge as last year. That might just be because they faced two weaker teams and they'll turn up for the big games.
Well, they're off to a good start already, 3 points ahead of Marseille and Monaco. But John, do they have a little bit of a problem brewing concerning the penalties? We've seen Vitinha last season was the penalty taker. He had that very slow run up where he walks up to the ball looking at the goalkeeper, and it was all working brilliantly until the Champions League semi-final against Arsenal, where he didn't take a good one. David Raya saved it. We saw him miss as well in the Super Cup shootout against Tottenham. And then on Friday night, he says, no, you can take it, Ousmane. I don't fancy it anymore. Ousmane Dembélé put it over the crossbar. We also saw Ramos miss one at the end of last season. They've missed 3 out of their last 5 in, non-penalty shootout penalties. Is there a problem, or am I just trying to invent a problem?
I don't think that there's necessarily a problem, but let's face it, PSG are no strangers to controversy over penalty takers over the years. You had the sort of famous Cavani-Neymar spat, or infamous Neymar and Cavani spat all those years ago. And I think it is the kind of thing that, people will look to try and snipe at PSG with very early on if it doesn't get remedied. I would probably be of the school of thought where if something's not really broken, you don't look to fix it. I think Vitinha has generally been quite a reliable, spot kick taker. His composure has come on leaps and bounds since he joined PSG, and it's, become really impressive. Certainly in, some of those, sudden death scenarios, particularly away at Liverpool at Anfield last season. I think this move was more designed to try and get Dembélé on the board, to get him feeling confident and to start sort of having him feeling a little bit more comfortable and like there's not a bit of pressure and a weight of expectation, given that he hasn't scored yet in Ligue.
Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation, and it may well be that. Like you say, John, Vitinha, he's a boss. I've been looking at the stats. He's also netted 12 out of his 13 penalties, if you don't include penalty shootouts. So he's got a good record. The thing is, though, Baptiste, when you've got that technique, that Neymar mastered, but it's so difficult. I think Ivan Toney is another one who can sort of, walk up to the ball, only look at the goalkeeper, wait till the last moment. That is all about being supremely confident in your head, isn't it? And Vitinha, if he's lost that, if he's got the slightest doubt, when the big moment comes, you don't necessarily fancy him to score. So if it is Vitinha, does he go back? Does he revert to a more sort of orthodox way of taking penalties, which he did, by the way, in pre-season, or does he stick with the technique?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, who am I to doubt Vitinha? He's been Europe's best midfielder for the last 18 months, probably. And that is based on his composure and his technical ability. He certainly knows way more about it than I do. I think it's just, for me, it's just a sign of them, in a way, like I said, playing themselves into shape. These are games that don't really matter to them. And they would have liked Dembélé to score for his confidence, because now there are expectations on him. I think last year in a way was a miracle season for Dembélé. If we remember where he was at the start of that season, everybody was doubting him, to now becoming maybe one of the top two for the Ballon d'Or. So I think Vitinha, I'm with JJ. I think Vitinha will likely be the one picked to take them, and he'll be trusted once again. And I think he's got the ability to do it.
Yeah, so basically, you both feel that I am trying to create issues at PSG that quite simply don't exist. And to be fair to PSG, they weren't the only ones who missed a penalty at the weekend. We mentioned Giroud missing. Mason Greenwood missed one, scored one as well, but a little bit erratic from him. Greenwood has scored 11 and missed 6 in his career, so he's not that consistent. And just a question to you, Jonathan. In recent years, we've lost Neymar, we've lost Ben Yedder, we've lost Lacazette this summer, and Jonathan David. Now, those guys, they would just almost every weekend be slotting home their penalty. I wonder, is there a penalty issue? Like, maybe I'm creating issues now for Ligue 1, but I don't see great penalty takers in Ligue 1 at the moment. Who's the current penalty king?
I think it would be remiss to overlook Le Havre, Abdoulaye Touré. I mean, 8 of his 10 goals last season for Hack scored from the spot. Top scorer for the team. Most importantly, scorer of the goal that kept Le Havre up in Ligue 1. The coolest Panenka that you'll ever see. Sealing a 3-2 win away at Europe, chasing Strasbourg deep into time added on. As pressurised a situation as it can possibly get, and to deliver a penalty of that quality, I think was absolutely superb. And if that wasn't enough, also scored a vital penalty in a 3-3 draw away at PSG the season before, which contributed another very valuable point towards Le Havre staying up that season as well. So I think in terms of reliability from the spot, it's very difficult to look past somebody like Abdoulaye Touré, who is absolutely integral to Le Havre when you look at the points that he's contributed from the spot over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, Abdoulaye Touré is unbelievable. The coolest man I think I've ever seen take a penalty. Out of the 8 he scored, I haven't got the exact figure, but I think 5 or 6 of them were Panenkas. And, I'm a bit of a warrior, and I just think next time the goalkeeper is just going to stand there and catch it. But I don't know, maybe Abdoulaye Touré's got a secret. Baptiste, anything to add? Are you going along with that? Abdoulaye Touré, the new penalty king of Ligue 1?
Difficult not to. I mean, that guy literally saved people's jobs over the years through Panenkas. That's quite an achievement. I think what I'm looking forward to, in a way, returning is Terem Moffi. I think he was quite a prolific penalty maker over the last few years, and he obviously had his injury, his season cut short through injury last year, and he looked quite good at the weekend, and he's going to be decisive for Nice. So I imagine he'll be the one stepping up. So I think he's only missed 1 in his career. So certainly one to look out for. But Abdoulaye Touré, I mean, the composure, Zidane-esque, but in a much, much different context.
Yeah, almost as much pressure, though, trying to keep a club in the division in the 99th minute as stepping up against Buffon in a World Cup final. It's fascinating. If we're forgetting anybody, or if you've got any comments, do send us an email across the channel, podcast@gmail.com. We really do hope to hear from you. We're going to finish up this weekend by talking about Lille, who I thought were absolutely outstanding against Monaco on Sunday night. Now, just a few stats for you. In the last 2 years, Lille have recouped 173 million euros in transfer dealings. They've spent 47 million euros. This summer alone, Bruno Genesio has lost Jonathan David, Lucas Chevalier, Bafodé Diakite, Angel Gomez, Gabriel Goodmanson, Ismaili, Remy Cabella, Mitchell Bakker. There are a couple more, but there are 8 first-team regulars who have gone, including a couple of big stars. And yet, Bruno Genesio has managed to mould a team that is already competitive. On paper, Monaco, I think, had a better side on Sunday night. But tactically, Lille were outstanding. In the second half, they got on top of Monaco, and it could have finished goalless, but ultimately Giroud got that goal right at the end. Bruno Genesio is this kind of unfashionable coach in France, I think, because for many years he was a youth team coach at Lyon. John, I'll put this to you first. The coach who has beaten Pep Guardiola, Diego Simeone, Carlo Ancelotti and Jose Mourinho in Europe, does he get enough credit? And is he today the number one coach? I was going to say in Ligue 1, but I reckon you'll say Luis Enrique, and maybe that's fair enough. Is he the best French coach around?
I think there's definitely a strong case for that. I'm a huge fan of Bruno Genesio. I think what he's done has been, really remarkable over the years, and I think he's long overdue some respect on his name. I think he's a wonderful guy away from the pitch, as well as what he gets his players to do on it. It was excellent to see him helping Lille get so many of those impressive results in the Champions League last season, but the consistency with which he generally manages to lead quite competitive teams in Ligue 1 as well, is definitely something that merits, a lot of overdue respect. And I think the other, sort of candidate for this title, and it's easy to overlook him because of the way that things finished in his final year in France with PSG, and the fact that he, hasn't, been back to France yet with Christophe Galtier. I think the difference between the two of them is that Galtier obviously has that Ligue 1 title from his time with Lille that, Genesio doesn't have at this moment in time. Maybe he will get it at some point. I don't know if I could see LOSC, sort of going the distance this season, despite the fact that I do like the fact that they have, quite a lot of experienced players in the side. You've got that balance in defence with Meunier and Perrault either side of the back four. You look in the midfield as well. I think keeping Benjamin André when it looked very likely that he might be picked up by newly promoted Paris FC, I think that was a real coup, for Genesio and for the club. And then obviously bringing back a revitalised Giroud and having him score early on. And I think it's quite promising, and I'm confident that Genesio will be able to lead, Lille towards the Champions League places once again and to be competitive. But I do think now all that's really missing for him to sort of be considered head and shoulders above the other top French coaches at this moment in time, is that kind of title. Because I think with Francaise, the fact that he managed to lead Lens so close to, potentially, knocking PSG off of their perch while restoring Lens to the Champions League, that was such a monumental achievement.
Yeah, Baptiste, what do you think? I was going to mention Francaise as a potential contender for best French coach. I think if you ask most French people, they'll probably say Zidane. Didier Deschamps standing down next summer, and everybody wants Zidane. Obviously, it's a bigger name than Bruno Genesio. It's a bigger figure in the history of French football. Others, in terms of French coaches, you've got Régis Lebris has done a great job at Sunderland. Christophe Pélissier, I think, as well, is a very good coach. Patrick Vieira is doing well with Genoa at the moment. But where do you stand on this? And should Genesio be in the frame to replace Didier Deschamps?
I think he's done outstandingly. The good thing about Genesio is that his teams always play good football. He always wants to see the academy graduates develop, and so he kind of creates a good link. Normally with fans, those are things that fans would want to see. He's still disrespected in Lyon for reasons that go beyond my comprehension, and he's kind of widely mocked there as Pep Genesio, but I think he's proven his mettle over the years. He is a bright manager with bright ideas. You can tell that in the way his team's set up on the pitch. In terms of his positioning amongst other French managers, I mean, I know he's not a popular choice at the moment, but Deschamps' accomplishments throughout his career, if you're looking at results, are second to none. He brought the title back to Marseille. He brought Juve back to Serie A. He won a World Cup. He reached a World Cup final, Euro final. I mean, people would dream of this sort of results, even with the means at his disposal. I think, and Zidane obviously did tremendous work, but at one club that he knew intimately, where he was given a lot of power, and he had this aura for obvious reasons that was there, but it was still an incredible achievement. I think if you're looking at current French club managers, you're right. I think Francaise is the obvious candidate, facing Pep Genesio in a way. So I think it's between those two. I have a slight preference for Francaise because I think he's faced more difficulties, but I think it's a good duel between the two, and I'm looking forward to seeing those two get the recognition that they deserve, frankly.
You're listening to the voice of reason of Baptiste Reynaud, and absolutely good point about Didier Deschamps. I think it would have been amiss of me not to include him in the debate. But yeah, Genesio and Lille are going to be fascinating to watch this season. You're right to single out as well the recruitment, which has been superb. I think, as John said, Haraldson is looking really good this season. They've made signings like Nathan Ngoy, who looked good at the back, the young Belgian on Sunday, Giroud obviously, and the youth academy. They sold Lenny Yoro a year ago, but Ayoub Bouadi, 17 years of age, was absolutely tremendous last night. We're running out of time, or we have run out of time, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode 2. I want to thank Jonathan Johnson and Baptiste Reynaud. We will be getting you guys back through the season if indeed you are willing to come back on. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and your insight has been fantastic. Next weekend, we've got quite a few big matches, but one absolutely huge game, Lyon against Marseille. The Olympico should be absolutely fascinating. I'm lucky. I'm going to Toulouse next Saturday to see Toulouse PSG, which is a table-topping clash. Both sides are on 6 points at the moment. So that should be good as well. And we look forward to discussing all of the action with you again on Across the Channel next week. We will see you then. Jonathan and Baptiste, have a great day. Have a great week. And it's time to say au revoir. We'll see you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.